What is up, fight fans? Welcome to a brand new series I'm going to be starting on the channel where I'm going to be rating each and every UFC fighter performance on a scale of 1 through 10, starting with the last weekend's event with Robert Whittaker versus Reinier the Ritter. But before we start, I'm just going to go over the notes and just the criteria of what I'm grading and why I'm grading it before I get going. So I'll rate pure performance, strictly how they performed on the night regardless of opposition. So this is strictly just how they looked on the night, how good was their performance, and it doesn't matter who they face. This is just strictly how do I think they looked. And secondly, I will rate their opponent themselves. How good is the opponent currently? Not their prime, but how is their current form? And next, I'll take the average of those two to determine the overall performance rating. The reason I wanted to do opponent and performance, just to give a little bit more context, where I think that if you have a perfect performance, but if it's against someone who, maybe shouldn't even be in the UFC, if we're being honest. No disrespect, of course, but I would rate a performance that was a tough, close-fought victory against, the best of the best over, just destroying someone who's, way outmatched. With that being said, a 10 out of 10 would be extremely difficult to achieve, where you need to have a perfect performance against, the very best in the division, like knocking out the champion in the first round, stuff like that. And of course, most importantly, these are all just my opinion, no disrespect intended to the athletes. If you disagree, leave your ratings down below and we can have a fun little discussion going. This is just meant for fun. Starting out with the heavyweights, we got Martin Buday defeating Marcus Buchecha via unanimous decision. And honestly, the pure performance rating for Buday, 6 out of 10, where this was a close fight coming in, but he was able to just edge it out. So I think 6 out of 10, good rating for him. And then opponent rating, Buchecha, relatively unproven, but very good BJJ practitioner. So that's got to count for something. 5 out of 10 opponent rating for Buchecha, and that puts Buday's overall rating at a 5.5. And as for Buchecha, obviously a lower rating as he lost, so a 3 out of 10 pure performance rating. He really didn't do good and mostly got dominated. So with that being said, 3 out of 10 pure performance rating, but the opponent rating does boost his overall rating a little bit, where the opponent rating is a 7 out of 10 as Buday is a ranked heavyweight. We've seen him continue to get these wins just purely based on his size, able to just lay on these guys a little bit and just show that he's a top 15 heavyweight in the UFC. Even though that may not be the most impressive division to be top 15 is, he still is a top 15 guy, so got to give him some respect on that opponent rating. So that brings his overall rating to a 5 out of 10. Moving on to the next fight, we have an absolute banger of a fight. Stephen Wynn versus Muhammad Yahya, and somehow, some way, this made it all the way to the end of the second round, where Herzog would not stop the fight despite Wynn getting knockdown after knockdown after knockdown. To be fair, Yahya did have a little bit of a moment at the beginning of round 2, but after that it was one-way traffic for Stephen Wynn. What a performance. 9 out of 10 pure performance rating for Stephen Wynn. Opponent rating, 2 out of 10. Yahya, at least tough enough to make it that far, but that's about his only good trait. No disrespect. So that's going to put Stephen Wynn at a 5.5 overall rating, strictly brought down by Yahya not being the best of opposition. And for Yahya, 1 out of 10 pure performance rating, not his best performance, but he was really tough, so got to give him some credit. And the opponent rating for Muhammad Yahya, 5 out of 10, Stephen Wynn, good up-and-coming fighter, but relatively unproven, so that's why it's not any higher, which puts Yahya's overall rating at a 3 out of 10. Not a great performance, but at least he was able to tough it out. If I was his corner, I would have thrown that in much sooner. If I was the ref, I would have stopped it after, the second or third knockdown in the first round where Wynn was clearly the better fighter. All right, in our next fight, this was barely even a fight. Bailey Alicana was able to defeat Ibo Aslan via unanimous decision, where neither guy really was throwing much whatsoever. Alicana was at least able to sit down on the punches a little more, but not a great fight at all. Bailey Alicana, even in the win, pure performance rating, 3 out of 10. Not a great performance, but at least he was able to get the win. Opponent rating 5 out of 10. Just an average UFC light heavyweight with Ibo. We've seen him look good, but he's been very inconsistent. So we'll see where he goes from here. Overall rating for Elikana in the win, 4 out of 10. Not the best rating for a win. And Ibo Aslan pure performance rating, 1 out of 10. Absolutely awful. It was basically a staring contest where we've seen Ibo Aslan in some crazy scraps. We've seen him knocked out. We've seen him have some knockouts. So, unfortunately, we did not see any of that this time. And it was just an overall really boring fight. Ibo Aslan, 3 out of 10 overall rating. Horrible fight from both guys, but at least it's over now. Moving on to Tabitha Ricci defeating Amanda Ribas via round 2 TKO after a beautiful elbow straight into the eye of Amanda Ribas. What a performance from Tabitha Ricci. 8 out of 10 performance rating. And her opponent, I'm going to give her a 7 out of 10. Amanda Ribas is a solid fighter, but I think she might be on the downward a little bit now. So 7.5 out of 10 for Tabitha Ricci on that win. As for Amanda Ribas, 3 out of 10 performance rating, 8 out of 10 opponent rating, where Tabitha Ricci is a really solid fighter, has beaten a lot of good fighters in the division, so no shame in losing to someone as good as Tabitha Ricci, but not her best performance, so 5.5 out of 10 for Amanda Ribas. Next fight, we're going to be breaking down. Davy Grant was able to defeat Damon Blackshear via unanimous decision. I'm going to give Davy Grant a 7 out of 10 here. It was a solid performance. I definitely agree with the winner. And as for his opponent, 6 out of 10. Damon Blackshear, a solid, above average UFC fighter, I would say. So 6.5 overall rating for Davy Grant in that win. As for Damon Blackshear, 4 out of 10 pure performance rating. He at least was able to put up a fight. And 6 out of 10 for his opponent. Davy Grant, solid fighter, always game. If you underestimate him, good luck. So overall, 5 out of 10 on that loss for Damon Blackshear. At least it was against a solid opponent, and at least it was somewhat competitive, but yeah. Grant, man, you can never underestimate the old man. Speaking of not underestimating the old man, Muslim Salikov in our next fight was able to defeat Carlos Leal in round 1 with a nasty, nasty KO punch. So that's going to give him a 10 out of 10 pure performance rating against a 5 out of 10 opponent. Carlos Leal, a little bit unproven, inconsistent. We've seen him have wins, but we've also seen him lose. So that brings Muslim Salikov to a 7.5 out of 10. Absolutely perfect performance, just not against the best of the best. As for Leal, 1 out of 10 against a 7 out of 10 opponent in Muslim Salikov. Solid fighter. He keeps proving us wrong, showing that even though he's getting older, he's not getting any worse. Shout out to Muslim Salikov. 7.5 out of 10 for him in the win. Carlos Leal, 4 out of 10 in the loss. Moving on to our next fight, we had Bryce Mitchell making his UFC debut at 135 and looking pretty solid doing it. He started out a little rocky where Saeed was looking good early, was able to get the knockdown in round 1, but after that, Mitchell basically dominated, so 6 out of 10 pure performance rating for Mitchell. Besides that first round, he really dominated afterward. Against a 7 out of 10 opponent, I think that Saeed is a really solid fighter in the UFC, just not quite top contender level. So that's why it's not any higher. So 6.7 out of 10 for Bryce Mitchell. And as for Saeed in the loss, 4 out of 10. He did have a good first round and had a nice submission later on in the fight, but it just was not enough. And 4 out of 10, I think, is a fair rating for him. As against an 8 out of 10 opponent, where Bryce is one of those guys in the UFC where he'll only lose to the best of the best. If you're not, Ilya or Bryce Emmett, you might have a tough time with him. And we saw that once again. So no shame in losing to someone that good. But it wasn't his best performance. 6 out of 10 overall. Pretty high rating for a loss, honestly. Moving on to yet another first round knockout. Bogdan Guskov was able to get Nikita Krylov out of there early in round 1. A 10 out of 10 pure performance rating versus a very solid fighter in Nikita Krylov. 7 out of 10 opponent rating. I think that Krylov is one of those fighters who Unfortunately, injuries might have held him back a little bit towards the end of his career, but he's always been one of the top guys in that division for a while now. So, bringing the average of those two, 8.5 out of 10 for Bogdan Guskov in an absolutely amazing performance against a tough fighter. Doesn't get much better than that. As for Nikita Krylov, doesn't get much worse than that. I'm sorry. But 1 out of 10 performance against, a solid up-and-coming fighter, though. So 7 out of 10 opponent rating for Bogdan Guskov, which brings Nikita Krylov's overall performance 4 out of 10 in the loss. At least it was against an absolute monster in Bogdan Guskov. As we are getting up on the main card, our next fight is Asu Alibayev defeating Jose Ochoa via unanimous decision. Solid 7 out of 10 performance. I think he really controlled most of the fight with his grappling and was able to get the job done against a solid, somewhat unproven fighter where we haven't seen him, do too much yet. But I do think that despite being 1-3 in the UFC, that Jose Ochoa does have a bright future. So that's why he's not any lower than 5 out of 10 and not any higher. So that brings Asu's overall rating to 6 out of 10 on the night. And Jose Ochoa, he put up a halfway decent fight, but he was just outmatched. Pure performance rating, 4 out of 10. Opponent rating is going to be 7 out of 10. Well, we've seen Asu Alibayev versus some of the best in the division, hold his own, even beat some of them. So, no shame in losing to such a good fighter. That's why 5.5 out of 10 is looking pretty solid in a loss for Jose Ochoa. On to the fight that won fight of the night. That is going to be Shara Bullet Magomedov defeating Marc-Andre Barriault via unanimous decision. This was an absolute scrap where both men hurt each other at one point. But besides that, I do think that Shara was able to control most of the action. He was getting hit a lot and did get hurt at moments, but he was able to get the job done. I do agree with the decision 100%. I'm going to give Shara a 6 out of 10 for that performance where it wasn't super dominant. It was back and forth, but he was able to get the job done against a 5 out of 10 opponent where Marc-Andre at one point had some nice little momentum going, but has only won 1 of his last 5. So that's going to bring him down to a 5 out of 10 opponent, which brings Shara at a 5.5 out of 10 overall rating for that performance, and Marc-Andre at a 5 out of 10, where his performance was really low, but at least it was up against an up-and-comer like Shara, who has only lost to MVP so far in his UFC career. Moving on to our co-main event, where Peter Yan was able to defeat Marcus McGee via unanimous decision. And this was a really fun fight. Both guys had some moments, but I think it was clear that Peter Yan was the better fighter on the night. 7 out of 10 performance from Peter Yan versus, I would say, a 7 out of 10 opponent where Marcus McGee is not quite top level yet, but he can prove me wrong, and that's going to bring Peter Yan to a 7 out of 10 overall for that performance. Solid performance versus, a bit of a step down of an opposition to where he normally is, but he got the job done and did what he needed to do. And as for Marcus McGee, 4 out of 10 I'm going to give him for the pure performance rating. He had some moments, but Peter Yan was able to get the better of him. I wish this was a 5-round fight, honestly, where I feel like they were kind of just warming up. And I feel like 5-round, they really could have separated themselves a little bit more. But with that being said, it was a loss versus one of the best in the division in Peter Yan. So 9 out of 10 opponent rating for Marcus McGee, which brings his overall to a 6.5 out of 10. No shame in that defeat where he was up against one of the best fighters in the division and held his own. And of course, for our main event, Reinier the Ritter defeated Robert Whittaker via split decision. I'm not sure if I agree with the split decision. I do think that it was close, and Robert did win 2 rounds, but I do think the Ritter was able to get it done 3-2. And I'm going to give that performance a 7 out of 10, where he was able to hurt Robert with those knees a few times, but got hurt himself. But overall, I was impressed with his performance, where even though it looks a little weird, he was really controlling the fight a lot, especially with his grappling, and was doing, honestly, more than Robert. And we're going to give that 7 out of 10. So we're going to give Reinier a 7 out of 10 on his performance rating versus an 8 out of 10 opponent. Robert would probably be a 9 out of 10 if this is a few years back, which brings Reinier de Ridder a 7.5 out of 10 on his performance. Solid win versus solid opposition. As for Robert Whittaker, 5 out of 10 performance. Not the best we've seen him look against, a solid fighter, so no shame in that. 8 out of 10 I'm going to give Reinier de Ridder, which may seem high. How is he even with Robert, who's a former champion? But remember, guys, we're going on current, not prime. So I'm going to give Robert a 6.5 out of 10 average for his overall rating. And yeah, guys, that's going to finish up the video. Do you guys agree with the ratings? Did I completely screw over some of the fighters? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be back next week for the next rating. So, subscribe, turn on post notifications, like, and, comment if you guys disagree. And have a great rest of your guys' day, and, stay safe until the next one.